My name is Elyse Wild, and you are listening to women's lifestyle magazine, Inspired Voices. Hi, welcome to another episode of Inspired Voices. My name is Elyse Wild. I hope you're doing well, I hope you're safe and healthy, and I hope your loved ones are too. We are entering the second month of life with coronavirus in our community, second full month rather. And today at Women's Lifestyle Magazine, we are also publishing our digital May edition. In the editor's letter for this edition, I wrote about how it's okay to be exhausted and fatigued of coronavirus coverage. I'm sure it's something that we will experience at some point if you haven't experienced it already. And in fact, experts, some of whom we've had on this podcast, recommend that you create boundaries around how you engage with coronavirus coverage, just to protect your own mental health. And while I think we can do that, and at the same time acknowledge and be present for the people in our community whose lives are tremendously upset by the pandemic. And that's one of the things that we want to accomplish with this podcast, is to provide an avenue for you to engage with the facts around how this is impacting different populations, some of whom are incredibly vulnerable, and give you a pathway to help. Even if that just means reposting something on Facebook and getting the word out there, or if it means making a monetary donation, or a donation of goods, or a donation of your time, or just the simple awareness itself. So I think it's really important that we create those boundaries, but that we stay informed and keep those who are deeply impacted by this in the front of our minds. So today we are going to be talking about a population that is especially isolated right now, senior citizens in nursing homes. On the show, I have Trish Brogdorff, who is the owner of Visiting Angels West Michigan. Visiting Angels is a home health service. It's non-medical, so they really provide company and support for their clients. And they are playing a crucial role in keeping the elderly connected to their family and to their loved ones, because they are allowed to go into nursing homes to continue to see their clients. My mom actually is a visiting angel, and she has actually been working more during this pandemic in picking up shifts because the need is greater. Visiting Angels has played a really special role in my family's life. We used their services when my grandparents were elderly. My mom was living with both of them and caring for both of them, and Visiting Angels was essential to their care and just keeping them company. Sometimes they would just watch a Tigers game or a Michigan State basketball game with my grandparents while my mom went to the grocery store, or cooked them dinner, or just simply having another person in the house to help my mom. Even though my grandparents didn't require a lot of care, it's still kind of a handful, and they became a really special part of our family. And then after my grandparents passed, my mom became involved with them and became an employee. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Trish and I talk about how the elderly population, which is the most vulnerable to coronavirus, is really struggling with the isolation of the measures that are required to keep them safe. I really enjoyed talking to Trish. She has a really graceful and eloquent way of communicating why something like Visiting Angels is important, and what it means to her to provide that service. I hope this podcast inspires you. It inspired me by driving home the fact that it's so important right now that we continue to stay connected, we continue to help each other, and we continue to reach out to these vulnerable populations, because connection is something that we can all give. So here we go. I hope you enjoy. With me today, guys, I have Trish Brogdorff, owner of Visiting Angels, which is a home health care service. Trish, can you tell me a little bit about your background and what a home health service is for those who may not be at the point yet where they have that kind of service in their life?
Absolutely. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in West Michigan for the most part, and did my education at Calvin, and graduated with a bachelor's in recreational therapy, but then continued on to work at a large church as a director of children's ministries for about 10 years. And in that job, I really learned the value of community, and I think people coming together to care for one another. So following an international mission trip I was on, I realized that the church had only limited impact in the world, and decided to go on to get my master's, thinking that I would return to the church and family ministry. But through getting my master's in social work from Western in 2000, I graduated and started working for hospice. And it was in my work in hospice where I really began to value the tension between people getting into hospice almost too late to focus on quality of life. And so hospice is all about quality of life, and yet people come and they're tired from navigating a system, and they're tired from treatments and hearing that their end of life is near often. And so when I had the opportunity to purchase Visiting Angels of West Michigan, it felt to me like a really good place to bring what I learned in ministry and what I learned through my education and my experience with hospice together to focus on quality of life earlier, before people were at a point of anticipating the end of their life. And so Visiting Angels feels very much like a culmination of my years of both education and experience, and allows me to carry that out day in and day out in a non-medical home care setting, which is where we go into the homes of most often seniors, but not only, because we have learned so well that illness does not define only by age, right? And so we will care for people in need in their homes or facilities with the activities of daily living. So our goal, our intent is to enter into a home and provide the support that is needed, that is defined by the care recipient, and they are able to kind of customize their care plan and invite us into the spaces where they feel the most need for help.
Wow, that was a beautiful answer. I have, Trish knows I have experience with Visiting Angels, as both my grandparents were clients. Well, and although my mother lived with my grandparents and took care of them full time, the Visiting Angels that we had were, truly visiting angels. Like, they became a part of our family. It was such a nice respite for my mom to have, so she could go to the grocery store, or just so she could take care of certain things around the house, or just, maybe participate a little bit more in her own life. That parts of her life that didn't involve caring for my grandparents. And it really, and they were quite healthy, I think, when they became clients of yours. And they certainly were not, as you said, at that. They were in that spot where they were, older, in their 90s, but they certainly weren't at end of life yet. And it really was just, it was such an enjoyable experience for my entire family to have Visiting Angels as I said, as a part of our family.
Well, and I know with your grandparents too, Elyse, it was just so neat to watch your grandparents interact in their own love story and in their own way of interacting, but then also honoring both of their spaces. Your grandma was in a very different place than your grandpa, right? And so to be able to be present in the home and care for both of them in their unique spaces was just a real delight for all of us. We loved them dearly.
Thank you. They were quite wonderful. So obviously, things have changed in the world, certainly in West Michigan. Coronavirus has changed so many things for so many people. And I want to hear about how things have changed for you and for Visiting Angels. I know that, if we don't know somebody personally, a lot of us are seeing stories in the news that a lot of senior citizens or elderly people that are in nursing homes can no longer be visited by their family.
Right.
That is just, that's got to be so hard, and that's where Visiting Angels kind of comes in at this time.
Yeah, there's a lot of different levels of care that we provide for it, and I think COVID-19 has definitely changed what we do at almost every level. We really have committed to being a highly relational business, right? Care provider. And so what happens in that now is that everything that we're being told and we hear and we believe is to limit our connection and our relationship. And so it's taken some real creativity and some sleepless nights, some brainstorming, and coming together with the caregivers to say, how are we going to continue to be the best we can be in this situation? Mm-hmm. And I think in that we have, we've established some new rhythms. We take caregivers report their daily temperatures. We really focus on small care teams in the home. So before, where there may have been 3 or 4 caregivers, we try to bring that down to 1 or 2. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right? And so just trying to minimize the number of people in and out of the home or the facility. The tension with that, of course, becomes if a caregiver becomes ill, mm-hmm. or unavailable for whatever reason, then the client feels like a greater loss because all of a sudden their 1 or 2 people are no longer available. And so we recognize that everything has a give and take, mm-hmm. right? But the safety of clients and caregivers is our number one commitment. And so small care teams is a way we are going and will continue for, I think, the unforeseeable future. I mean, this is likely not a short-term solution or change to our industry. We've increased family communication. I think the number of times where we pick up the phone now instead of shooting a text or an email because of the importance of connecting voice to voice, mm-hmm. About people who are deeply loved. So there is a lot of differences. We've been so blessed by the generosity of people who sew fabric masks at home. And so caregivers have 3 or 4 masks. So the fabric mask cannot be worn from one home into the next. So they need multiple masks to ensure we're not cross-contaminating from home to home if there is a risk of that.
That's great. That's great. Wow.
Okay. So, and then we have the PPE equipment in very limited sense, if needed. We have disposable lab coats, we have face shields, we have goggles. So if we do find that we are caring for a COVID positive patient, we will continue to provide care. We are committed to not treat COVID-19 like leprosy, where all of a sudden we don't want to be in the care of somebody. So we want to continue to provide care and, again, taking the most precautions possible.
Mm-hmm. I guess it hadn't occurred to me until you just said that response that we might naturally have during this pandemic to immediately cut off contact with a person, and that in fact, although that might be a natural reaction right now, that in fact is cruel in a sense, and is not actually the most practical thing.
It's a very difficult place, and we've given all the caregivers full permission to opt out of providing care for someone who is tested positive if they're not comfortable. But I am so grateful for the multitude of angels we have on our staff, and that's about 45 individuals who, for the most part, there are some who have chosen that, and we fully respect that. And there are many who say they are all in, and we will take all precautions possible. But the relationship goes deeper than their fear at that point. And they recognize it could also put them at a point of self-quarantining, if need be. But hopefully we will be able to navigate those spaces with just discernment and compassion. I think where we see that probably the greatest impact is in the facilities, whether that be the assisted living, nursing, or independent living. They are now without family contact.
Yeah.
And so we are often the only people that are permitted in from the outside, so to speak. And that has proven to be a place where we are seeking to be creative, where we're looking at establishing Mondays as photo day, and they send a photo to a family member, and Tuesdays as write a note day, and Wednesdays as phone call day, because I find that both the client and the family are longing for ways to be connected.
Yeah, that's great. So you're creating ways that they can engage within a structure, and that has
Yeah.
to also make people, set up the anticipation of
Yeah.
those days. That's really
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. And I think what we find in that is that the clients are, they're just increased anxiety, right? They aren't sleeping at night. Their rhythms are interrupted. They can't leave their rooms, and they have the news on all day long,
Mhm.
right? And so often the visiting angels will enter and say, why don't we turn the news off? And why don't we put some music on? And why don't we look at some pictures and just try to bring um, a little bit of protection
Mhm.
to what they are kind of immersed in all day long without support from those they love.
Yeah, it has to be really scary for that population, which is extremely at risk,
Mhm.
to be isolated in that way. And I guess it is common for people in that age group to have the news on, and
Yeah.
it didn't occur to me that's got to be exacerbate a lot of fear and anxiety.
Yeah, and recently I was speaking with one of our clients who is a retired physician, and he watches ambulances come and go from a facility, and he admittedly said, I do not know if they are all COVID related, but I feel like I'm playing a game of Russian roulette.
Wow.
And I think it's just the powerful impact of what's happening around them in their communities, where they see others at risk, and being where they hear on the news about the nursing homes and the large number of deaths. um, and so it really is, I think, a time where my kind of calling and conviction to develop community for both caregivers and care recipients families is even more crystallized.
Yeah, this must be somewhat validating in that way. Of
Yeah.
this is a moment where this is undeniably essential.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, because there's so much debate about essential versus non-essential, and somebody will say, well, is it really essential that you go in and make that visit for 2 hours a week? And I say, I really do believe it is essential, right? It is essential to more than just physical need. It's essential to mental health and
Mm.
anxiety control and stability for that senior citizen. So it is a time where it's not an easy time, but it is a time where it feels critical to be providing the services that we do.
Mhm. Wow. Wow. Well, I'm so glad that you are continuing on, and it sounds like you have a really amazing staff that's really committed.
Oh,
Um,
I purchased Visiting Angels in 2003, so we are on our 17th year. And I will say, a small percentage of our reputation is what happens in the office. A much greater percentage of our reputation is the caregivers who are out in the field carrying out the daily tasks. And they're an amazing group of people who, like I said, are very committed to bringing quality of life. And that quality may be in the moment, and it may be memory making. It depends on the situation, but they are committed to bring joy and good care and compassion. And for that, that is why I can sleep at night, right? Is because I know I have amazing angels out there doing the work that needs to be done.
Trish, is there anything else that you want to say about what's going on right now, or what your hopes for the future are?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult thing to speak to in an overarching, because every situation is so different. But I will say that I believe we are in a time where we're called to be community to one another. And so if that means that you have a loved one who is in a facility, likely, and I heard again last night, that the facilities will be closed down to family for a long time. And if there are means for people to take loved ones home, we would gladly be a resource, not only business wise, and maybe not even business wise, but to brainstorm on what that looks like and how that might be done. We would welcome calls to just say, help me think through this.
Mhm.
And if they never utilize Visiting Angels, that's okay, right? We don't have a lot of resources where you can just talk through the options. or what would it look like? But I think, the flip side of that is that it's not possible for everybody. And so I would just invite the West Michigan community to be creative in how they are caring for the seniors who live around them and also in the facilities near them. And if that is in delivering cards, if that's in decorating sidewalk chalk or windows or tic-tac-toe, as we've seen on the news, you can play through the window, as the weather gets nicer, to be able to be outside and serenade people, sing to people, bring joy in every opportunity you get. Visiting angels is not the only way that can be done. And so I would just invite the community at large to engage our seniors with quality of life and color and vibrancy, and to bring joy in the midst of these hardships.
It was very beautifully said.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Trish. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation, and we'll stay in touch.
To stay in touch with us, please visit www.womenslifestyle.com and sign up for our newsletter. You can also listen to this podcast on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is Women's Lifestyle, all one word. If you have any ideas for a podcast episode, or if you'd like to hear from someone we haven't interviewed yet, please reach out to me at elyse@womenslifestyle.com. That's Elyse at womenslifestyle.com. I hope you are all staying healthy and staying safe, and thank you so much for listening.